Shoes. Recorded live.
Okay, welcome folks to the Patriots Pub. Pull up a stool, grab your favorite beverage, and relax and enjoy while we study U.S. history, the Constitution, the Founding Fathers, with our hosts, Loki, from the halls of Valhalla, and Troy LaPlante, and myself, Brian Bonner. We will try and guide you through the experience. All right, let's see where we should start tonight. I think I'm just going to start. This was a tough one, and I've been real busy. But I figured I'd go with a quick little timeline, I guess. All right, we were left off in the second victory for Washington as his troops defeat the British at Princeton and drive them back to New Brunswick. Washington then establishes quarters at Morristown, New Jersey during the harsh winter. Washington's army shrinks to about 1,000 men as enlistments expire and deserters flee the hardships. By spring, with the arrival of recruits, Washington will have 9,000 men. By the 12th of March, 1777, the Continental Congress will return to Philadelphia from Baltimore after Washington's successes against the British in New Jersey. American troops under Benedict Arnold defeat the British at Richfield, Connecticut. We want to talk about Benedict Arnold. The flag of the United States, consisting of 13 stars, 13 white and red stripes, is mandated by Congress. John Paul Jones is chosen by Congress to captain the 18-gun vessel Ranger with his interesting mission to raid coastal towns of England. Bet you haven't heard that before. June 17, 1777, a British force of 7,700 men under General John Burgoyne invades from Canada, sailing down Lake Champlain toward Albany, planning to link up with General Howe, who will come north from New York City, thus cutting off New England from the rest of the colonies. General Burgoyne's troops stunned the Americans with the capture of Fort Ticonderoga on Lake Champlain. Its military supplies are greatly needed by Washington's forces. The loss of the fort is a tremendous blow to American morale. Okay, we'll skip over some of this stuff. I like this one here. July 27, 1777, the Marquis de Lafayette, a 19-year-old French aristocrat, arrives in Philadelphia and volunteers to serve without pay. Congress appoints him as a major general in the Continental Army. Lafayette will become one of General Washington's most trusted aides.
Hey, Brian. Just pause real briefly.
Yes.
Today is the 250th birthday of the Marquis de Lafayette, today. So I thought I'd throw that out.
Wow, he's pretty old, kid. Do we have any other interesting facts? But that is pretty interesting. I didn't know it was today. We're doing this today. That's quite coincidental. It's almost ironic. We're doing this today on his 250th birthday, guys.
Yeah, I was just looking through a bit of a this day in history and birthdays in history this morning on one of my websites, and lo and behold, today in 1757, Marquis de Lafayette was born. I just found that very interesting and very timely, considering that we were going to be discussing him this evening. Back to you.
It was okay. So. We'll move on. There's a lot going on, but I'm not going to cover all of it, obviously, because I want to get to the Articles of Confederation and the Treaty of Paris and all that kind of stuff. And of course, next show I want to get to the Constitution, finally. All right. And the Battle of Bennington, militiamen from Vermont, aided by Massachusetts troops, wipe out a detachment of 800 German Hessians sent by General Burgoyne to seize horses. I like that one. And September 1777, in the Battle of Brandywine Creek, General Washington and the main American army of 10,500 men are driven back toward Philadelphia by General Howe's British troops. Both sides, however, suffered heavy losses. Congress then leaves Philadelphia and resettles in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Okay, the Battle of Saratoga results in the first major American victory of the Revolutionary War as General Horatio Gates and General Benedict Arnold defeat General Burgoyne, inflicting 600 British casualties, American losses at only 150. On October 17th, 1777, General Burgoyne and his entire army of 5,700 men surrendered to the Americans led by General Gates. The British are then marched to Boston, placed on ships, and sent back to England after swearing not to serve again in the war against America. News of the American victory at Saratoga soon travels to Europe and boosts support for the American cause. In Paris, the victory is celebrated as if it had been a French victory. Ben Franklin is received by the French royal court. France then recognizes the independence of America on October 17, 1777. Okay, so now we're coming to the Articles of Confederation, which I wanted to get to. November 15th, 1777. Congress adopts the Articles of Confederation as the government of the new United States of America, pending ratification by the individual states under the Articles. Congress is the sole authority of the new national government. Okay, with that, we'll start with Loki and see what he's got. Go ahead, Loki.
Yeah, I think with the Articles of Confederation, that was actually the first step and the first real test of how this nation was going to be able to perform. And the Articles of Confederation, if you actually read them, there's a lot in there that was transferred from the Articles of the Confederation to the Constitution of the United States. It followed actually very closely as far as states' rights and what Congress was allowed to do. However, what they didn't put in there were by having Congress as the sole ruler of the country, as far as the government was concerned, they did find out eventually that the federal government or the central government still needed to be a little bit stronger. And I think that's something that we'll see when we talk about the lead up to the Constitution of the United States. But the Articles of Confederation were really the first attempt by the Congress of the United States at that time to establish a strong central government. But unfortunately, as we learned through history, it wasn't really strong enough. It was still weaker than the states, but it still needed just a little bit more power, and they needed to put the checks and balances in there, which they did eventually add into the Constitution. And I know there are people that have asked me before when it talks in the preamble of the Constitution where it says, "We the people of the United States," they've asked me before, but nowhere does it define what the United States is. But the Articles of Confederation actually do define what is meant by the term the United States of America. Back at you.
Yes, absolutely true. And I will read a little something of John Adams on the Articles of Confederation after we're done discussing it. Troy, what do you got on this? Go ahead.
Well, let's pick up where Loki just left off. And a lot of people don't understand why the preamble says, in order to form a more perfect union. So if people would take that and comprehend, we already had a union in place. And that's in a perpetual union. So it was said by the Articles of Confederation. And like he was saying as well, we already had stuff like freedom of movement between states. We had things that stuff like extradition was covered in the Articles of Confederation. We talked the central government being able to conduct foreign relations, declare war, and there were limitations. One state, one vote sort of thing, and very weak on taxation powers in order to conduct the affairs. So when you look at although there were some great positives, there were some great negatives, and that's where we're going to where he was talking about we the people, and then how to form a more perfect union. So yeah, there's a lot that leads from one end to the other, and I'm sure we'll get into that more.
Okay. Does anybody want to read the Articles of Confederation, or do we think that's just not necessary? Go ahead.
It's about a 20-minute narration. If you want the Articles of Confederation, just like I had the Declaration of Independence, I can also put through on audio the articles, but it's about a 20-minute total sort of narration. So that's entirely up to you guys.
Loki?
I mean, I think we can go ahead and do that if you want, or at least read parts of it to basically make some definitions, and so we can see what they were thinking at that time. And there are a lot, and then like Troy said, there was a tremendous amount in the articles that were put into the Constitution, and like I said, or like Troy said, that it was the Constitution was to form a more perfect union. It wasn't going to be perfect, but it was going to be more perfect, and they understood that, and they also, that is why the founders also put in the Constitution the ability to change it, because they realized they didn't have all the answers, and they understood that society was going to change. And I think really, if we look at it, and I'd like to go ahead and read the preamble, because that really defines what the United States is and what the United States was intended to be. And if you don't mind that, I'd just go ahead and do that now. To all of whom these presents shall come, we the undersigned delegates of the states affix our names, send greeting. Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union between the states of New Hampshire, Massachusetts Bay, Rhode Island and Providence Plantations, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. And Article 1 says, the style of this confederacy shall be the United States of America. So that is where it actually defined what the United States was. It was a union of those 13 colonies. And I think that's very important from historical context to understand that it was when it transpired from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution, and it talked about we the people of the United States of America. United States of America was already defined. So we knew what they were talking about. And there have been people arguing that the United States of America only refers to Washington, D.C. Doesn't refer to the whole country. And this is one thing I've heard people use on taxation in the 16th Amendment. Would say, well, the states aren't part of the United States. That just refers to the central government in Washington, D.C. And I said, well, you got to read the Articles of Confederation, too, because that defines what the United States are. And so that's one argument that I've used that on, and where the definition was actually initially proposed and set in stone. Back at you.
Okay, with that, I think as moderator, I'll make a command decision. We obviously need to have these down for people so that they can compare them to the Constitution when we start discussing it. And of course, we can refer back to it. All right, Troy, see if you can get a copy of it up. We're gonna split this up. I'm going to start by reading 2 through 6. If you don't have it right in front of you, there's a link I put up there in the interface. I don't know if you're on the interface, though. No, he's not. He's just.
No, I'm not. I'm not on the TalkShoe interface.
All right. You can go to historyplace.com. It's there. historyplace.com/United States/revolution/confed.htm. All right. I'll waste time while you're doing that. Each state retains its sovereignty, freedom, and independence, and every power, jurisdiction, and right, which is not by this confederation expressly delegated to the United States in Congress assembled. Sounds familiar. Article 3. The said states hereby severally enter into a firm league of friendship with each other for their common defense, the security of their liberties, and their mutual and general welfare, binding themselves to assist each other against all force offered to or attacks made upon them, or any of them, on account of religion, sovereignty, trade, or any other pretense whatever. Number 4, the better to secure and perpetuate mutual friendship and intercourse among the people of the different states of this Union. The free inhabitants of each of these states, paupers, vagabonds, and fugitives from justice excepted, shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities of free citizens in the several states, and the people of each state shall free ingress and regress to and from any other state, and shall enjoy therein all the privileges of trade and commerce, subject to the same duties and positions and restrictions as the inhabitants thereof respectively, provided that such restrictions shall not extend so far as to prevent the removal of property imported into any state to any other state of which the owner is an inhabitant, provided also, this is a great one, voice goes on, provided also that no imposition, duties, or restrictions shall be laid by any state on the property of the United States or either of them. Any person guilty of a charge with treason, felony, or other high misdemeanor in any state flee from justice and be found in any other United States, he shall, upon demand of the governor or executive power of the state from which he fled, be delivered up and removed to the state having jurisdiction of offense. Full faith and credit shall be given in each of these states to the records, acts, and judicial proceedings of the courts and magistrates of every other state. Basically saying states are independent, states can trade freely, people can trade freely among states, and if you go to that state, you're subject to the rules of that state. And of course, if criminals go there, you got to give them back. All right, number 5, for the most convenient management of the general interests of the United States, delegates shall be annually appointed in such a manner as the legislatures of each state shall direct, to meet in Congress on the first Monday in November in every year, with a power reserved to each state to recall its delegates, or any of them, at any time within the year, and to send others in their stead for the remainder of the year. No state shall be represented in Congress by less than 2, nor delegate be capable, but no more than 7 members, and no person shall be capable of being a delegate for more than 3 years in any term of 6 years. Nor shall any person, being a delegate, be capable of holding office, any other office under the United States, for which he or another, for his benefit, receives any salary, fees, or emolument of any kind. Each state shall maintain its own delegates in a meeting of the states, and while they act as members of the committee of these states, in determining questions in court, in any court or place out of Congress, and the members of Congress shall be protected in their persons from arrest or imprisonments during the time of their going to and from and attendance on Congress, except for treason, felony, or breach of peace. Yeah, we've kind of seen that in recent times. That's come up. And I find that interesting. All right. So we're up to number 6. Troy, are you ready to continue? Go ahead.
Sure, I'll pick it up from there. No state, without the consent of the United States in Congress assembled, shall send any embassy to, or receive any embassy from, or enter into any conference, agreement, alliance, or treaty with any king, prince of state, nor shall any person holding any office of profit or trust under the United States, or any of them, except any present, emolument, office, or title of any kind whatever from any king, prince, or sovereign state. Nor shall the United States in Congress assembled, be any of them, grant any title of nobility. That's one big run-on sentence. No 2 more states shall enter into any treaty, confederation, or alliance, whatever between them, without the consent of the United States in Congress assembled, specifying accurately the purposes for which the same is to be entered into and how long it shall continue. No state shall lay any imposts or duties which may interfere with any stipulations in treaties entered into by the United States in Congress assembled, with any king, prince, or state in pursuance of any treaties already imposed by Congress to the courts of France and Spain. No vessel of war shall be kept up in time of peace by any state, except such number only as shall be deemed necessary by the United States in Congress assembled for the defense of such state, or its trade, nor shall any body of forces be kept up by any state in time of peace, except such number only as in the judgment of the United States in Congress assembled shall be deemed requisite to garrison the forts necessary for the defense of such state. But each state shall always keep up a well-regulated and disciplined militia, sufficiently armed and accoutred, and shall provide and constantly have ready for use in public stores a due number of filed pieces in tents, and a proper quantity of arms, ammunition, and camp equipage. No state shall engage in any war without the consent of the United States in Congress assembled, unless such state be actually invaded by enemies, or shall have received certain advice of a resolution being formed by some nation of Indians to invade such state, and the danger is so imminent as not to admit of a delay till the United States in Congress assembled can be consulted, nor shall any state grant commissions to any ships or vessels of war, nor letters of marque or reprisal, except it be after a declaration of war by the United States in Congress assembled, and then only against the kingdom or state and the subjects thereof, against which war has been so declared, and under such regulations as shall be established by the United States in Congress assembled, unless such states be infested by pirates, in which case vessels of war may be fitted out for that occasion, and kept so long as danger shall continue, or until the United States in Congress assembled shall determine otherwise. That's a mouthful.
Boy, that's a mouthful.
Oh, you haven't seen nothing yet.
You want me to keep going to Article 7?
Oh, my goodness.
All right.
Yeah, we'll let Loki come in Article 9. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks.
Well, we're at 7 now, right?
Yeah, right, Troy, keep going
okay.
till number 9, and then Loki will come in and relieve you of that responsibility again.
When land forces are raised by any state for the common defense, all officers of or under the rank of colonel shall be appointed by the legislature of each state respectively, by whom such forces shall be raised, or in such manner as such state shall direct, and all vacancies shall be filled up by the state which first made the appointment. Number 8, or VIII. All charges of war and all other expenses that shall be incurred for the common defense or general welfare and allowed by the United States in Congress assembled shall be defrayed out of a common treasury, which shall be supplied by the several states in proportion to the value of all land within each state, granted or surveyed for any person, as such land in the buildings and improvements thereon shall be estimated according to such mode as the United States in Congress assembled shall from time to time direct and appoint. The taxes for paying that proportion shall be laid and levied by the authority and direction of the legislatures of the several states within the time agreed upon by the United States in Congress assembled.
Okay, I guess that's my turn here. Article 9. The United States in Congress assembled shall have the sole and exclusive right and power of determining on peace and war, except in cases mentioned in the 6th article of sending and receiving ambassadors, entering into treaties and alliances, provided that no treaty of commerce shall be made whereby the legislative power of the respective states shall be restrained from imposing such imposts and duties on foreigners as their own people are subjected to, or from providing the exportation or importation of any species of goods or commodities whatsoever, of establishing rules for deciding in all cases what captures on land or water shall be legal, and in what manner prizes taken by land or naval forces in the service of the United States shall be divided or appropriated, of granting letters of marque and reprisal in times of peace, appointing courts for the trial of piracies and felonies committed on the high seas, and establishing courts for receiving and determining finally appeals in the case of all captures, provided that no member of Congress shall be appointed a judge of any said court. The United States in Congress assembled shall also be the last resort on appeal in all disputes and differences now subsisting or that hereafter may arise between two or more states concerning boundary, jurisdiction, or any other causes whatever, which authority shall always be exercised in the manner following. Whenever the legislative or executive authority or lawful agent of any state in controversy with another shall present a petition to Congress stating the matter in question and praying for a hearing, notice thereof shall be given by order of Congress to the legislative or executive authority of the other state in controversy, and a day assigned for the appearance of the parties by their lawful agents, who shall then be directed to appoint a joint consent commissioners or judges to constitute a court for hearing and determining the matter in question. But if they cannot agree, Congress shall name 3 persons out of each state, and from list of such persons, each party shall alternately strike out one, the petitioners beginning, until the member shall be reduced to 13. And from that number, not less than 7, or more than 9 names as Congress shall direct, shall in presence of Congress be drawn out by lot, and the persons whose names shall be so drawn, or any 5 of them, shall be commissioners or judges to hear and finally determine the controversy. So always as a major part of the judges who shall hear the cases shall agree in the determination. And if either party shall neglect to attend on the day appointed, without showing reasons, which Congress shall judge sufficient, or being present shall refuse to strike, the Congress shall proceed to nominate 3 persons out of each state, and the Secretary of Congress shall strike in behalf of such party absent or refusing, and the judgment and sentence of the court to be appointed in the manner before prescribed shall be final and conclusive. And if any of the parties shall refuse to submit to authority of such court, or to appear or defend their claim or cause, the court shall nevertheless proceed to pronounce sentence or judgment, which shall in like manner be final and decisive. The judgment or sentence and other proceedings being in either case transmitted to Congress and lodged among the acts of Congress for the security of the parties concerned, provided every commissioner, before he sits in judgment, shall take an oath to be administered by one of the judges of the Supreme or Superior Court of the state where the cause shall be tried, well and truly to hear and determine the matter in question, according to the best judgment, without favor, affection, or hope of reward, provided also that no state shall be deprived of territory for the benefit of the United States. Oh, that was a long sentence. Okay, next part is, all controversies concerning the private right of soil claimed under different grants of 2 or more states, whose jurisdictions that they may respect such lands, and the states which pass such grants are adjusted, the said grants or either of them being at the same time claimed to have originated antecedent to such settlement of jurisdiction, shall, on the petition of either party to Congress of the United States, be finally determined as near as may be in the same manner as it is before presubscribed for deciding disputes respecting territorial jurisdiction between different states. The United States in Congress assembled shall also have the sole and exclusive right and power of regulating the alloy and value of coins struck by their own authority, or by that of the respective states, fixing the standards of weights and measures throughout the United States, regulating the trade and managing all affairs with the Indians, not members of any of the states, provided that the legislative right of any state within its own limits be not infringed or violated, establishing or regulating post offices from one state to another throughout the United States, and exacting such postage on the papers passing through the same as may be requisite to defray the expenses of the said office, appointing all officers of the land forces in the service of the United States, excepting regimental officers, appointing all the officers of the naval forces and commissioning all officers whatever in the service of the United States, making rules for the government and regulation of the said land and naval forces, and directing their operations. The United States in Congress assembled shall have authority to appoint a committee to sit in the recess of Congress, to be denominated a committee of the states, and to consist of one delegate from each state, and to appoint such other committees and civil officers as may be necessary for managing the general affairs of the United States under their direction, to appoint one of their members to preside, provided that no person be allowed to serve in the office of President more than 1 year in any term of 3 years, to ascertain the necessary sums of money to be raised for the service of the United States, and to appropriate and apply the same for defraying public expenses, to borrow money or emit bills on the credit of the United States, transmitting every half year to the respective states an account of the sums of money so borrowed or emitted, to build and equip a navy, to agree upon the number of land forces, and to make requisitions from each state for its quota, in proportion to the number of white inhabitants in such state, with the requisition shall be binding, and therefore the legislature of each state shall appoint the regimental officers, raise the men and cloth, arm and equip them in a solid-like manner at the expense of the United States, and the officers and men so clothed, armed, and equipped shall march to the place appointed, and within the time agreed on by the United States in Congress assembled. But if the United States in Congress assembled shall, on consideration of circumstances, judge proper that any state should not raise men, or should raise a smaller number of men than the quota thereof, such extra number shall be raised, officered, clothed, armed, and equipped in the same manner as the quota of each state, unless the legislature of such state shall judge that such extra number cannot be safely spread out in the same time, in which case they shall raise, officer, clothe, arm, and equipped as many of such extra number as they judge can be safely spared. And the officers and men so clothed, armed, and equipped shall march to the place appointed, and within the time agreed on by the United States in Congress assembled. The United States in Congress assembled shall never engage in a war, nor grant letters of marque or reprisal in the time of peace, nor enter into any treaties or alliances, nor coin money, nor regulate the value thereof, nor ascertain the sums and expenses necessary for the defense and welfare of the United States, or any of them, nor emit bills, nor borrow money on the credit of the United States, nor appropriate money, nor agree upon the number of vessels of war to be built or purchased, or the number of land or sea forces to be raised, nor appoint a commander-in-chief of the army or navy unless 9 states assent to the same, nor shall a question on any other point except for adjourning from day to day be determined, unless the votes of the majority of the United States in Congress assembled. The Congress of the United States shall have the power to adjourn to any time within the year, and to any place within the United States, so that no period of adjournment be for a longer duration than the space of 6 months, and shall publish the journal of the proceedings monthly, except such parts thereof relating to treaties, alliances, or military operations, as in their judgment require the secrecy and the yeas and nays of the delegates of each state on any question shall be entered on the journal. When it is desired by any delegates of a state or any of them, at his or their request shall be furnished with a transcript of the said journal, except such parts that are above accepted, to lay before the legislatures of the 7 states.
Applause.
All right, I'm going to take a break there.
We apologize. I'm just going to tell you to. That was hard work, and that was a lot covered. Now, there's only 13 articles, folks. That was one of them. The next 3 are shorter, and then we have the last one, which do go on a bit. But does anyone want to discuss what? I mean, to me, this is just daily running of the government. God, I can't believe you thought the Constitution was hard to read. It's easier than this. And I don't know who wrote this. I forgot to look it up, or who was responsible for putting this legalese of nonsense together. But my Lord, this is why people can't read contracts. Which, of course, what a Constitution or Articles of Confederacy are. They covered a lot in that one deal there. I mean, it's basically the running of the government and the limitations of the government and the granting of powers to the states, but the limitations thereof in certain circumstances. And I just felt like I had to talk like them for a minute. Troy, do you have anything to add to that? Go ahead.
Not really. I mean, it's a long-winded explanation as to how we're going to handle warfare, how we're not going to handle it, and the states' rights versus, okay, here's what the state shall do or not, and here's what the the Confederation is going to be responsible for, and that's it. I mean, when you get to stuff like treaties, alliances, coining money, and there's a lot of things that I wish we could see in our own present day, but you know, we're not going to comment on stuff like that, as we decided we would do. But yeah, I mean, basically it's a long-winded explanation, dissertation of rights and responsibilities. Probably responsibility more the better word.
And I agree with Troy. It is a long dissertation, and I think what they did do, and most of this was actually put in the Constitution also. But what they did, instead of having a sentence that ran on for paragraphs, they actually broke it up into sections and said, okay, this is one responsibility, this is another. They actually made it a little bit easier to read and understand. The Articles of Confederation were very difficult for the average citizen of this country to sit back and read and understand what was meant at that time. And I think that when we start talking about the Constitution, we will see most of this was put into the Constitution. But it was also put in a way that the people could understand it. Back at you.
Okay. Well, Troy, just please remember you forgot tonight to let me know when you're done speaking, because the delay, it's just killing me. I hate to do this to you, but I'm going to read the next 3, and I'm going to leave the last one for you because, well, I have to read James Madison afterwards. I think that's only fair. So I'll do 10, 11, and 12, and you jump in for 13. The 10, 11, and 12 are short. I'm taking the short ones for myself, folks. I'm being terrible. 10, the Committee of the States, or any 9 of them, shall be authorized to execute, in the recess of Congress, such of the powers of Congress as the United States in Congress assemble. By the consent of the 9 states, shall from time to time think expedient to vest them with, provided that no power be delegated to the said committee, for the exercise of which, by the Articles of Confederation, the voice of 9 states in Congress of the United States assembled be requisite. Number 11, Canada acceding to this confederation and adjoining in the measures of the United States shall be admitted into and entitled to all the advantages of this union, but no other colonies shall be admitted into the same unless such admission be agreed to by 9 states. Well, all bills of credit emitted, monies borrowed, and debts contracted by or under the authority of Congress before the assembling of the United States in pursuant of the present Confederation shall be deemed and considered as a charge against the United States for payment and satisfaction whereof the United States and public faith are hereby solemnly pledged. Now, I just want to stop here. I've been watching these sentences. Now, I got berated all the time when I was in Honors English about having run-on sentences. You have got to be kidding me. I've never had sentences as long as number 12, yet alone the other ones. I mean, these are like one sentences. I'm sorry. When did we get so ruly about English, considering these are the people that were supposed to be great orators and writers of our time? And that's just one sentence. That's all. All right, Troy, go ahead. I'll get ready to read my thing.
All right, number 13. Every state shall abide by the determination of the United States in Congress assembled on all questions which by this Confederation are submitted to them, and the articles of this Confederation shall be inviolably observed by every state, and the Union shall be perpetual, nor shall any alteration at any time hereafter be made in any of them unless such alteration be agreed to in a Congress of the United States and be afterwards confirmed by the legislature of each state. And whereas it hath pleased the great governor of the world to incline the hearts of the legislatures we respectively represent in Congress to approve of and to authorize us to ratify the said Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union, know ye that we, the undersigned delegates, by virtue of the power and authority to us given for that purpose, do by these presents, in the name and in behalf of our respective constituents, fully and entirely ratify and confirm each and every of the said Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union, and all and singular the matters of things therein contained. And we do further solemnly plight and engage the faith of our respective constituents that they shall abide by the determinations of the United States in Congress assembled on all questions which by the said Confederation are submitted to them, and that the articles thereof shall be inviolably observed by the states we respectively represent, and that the Union shall be perpetual. In witness whereof we have hereunto set our hands in Congress, done at Philadelphia in the state of Pennsylvania, the 9th day of July, in the year of our Lord 1778, in the 3rd year of the independence of America, agreed to by Congress 15 November 1777, and in force after ratification by Maryland the 1st of March 1781. Back at you. Done.
Okay, I know you're done. Okay. This is from the writings of James Madison, edited by Gellert Hunt. James Madison, May 7, 1787. May 7, 1787. Vices of the Political System of the United States. Failure of the states to comply with the constitutional requisitions. One, this evil has been so fully experienced both during the war and since the peace, results so naturally from the number and independent authority of the states, and has been so uniformly exemplified in every similar confederacy, that it may be considered as not less radically and permanently inherent in than it is fatal to the object of the present system. They do talk weird. Okay, number 2, encroachments of the states on the federal authority. Examples of this are numerous, and repetitions may be foreseen in almost every case where any favorite object of a state shall present a temptation. Among these examples are the wars and treaties of Georgia with the Indians, the unlicensed compacts between Virginia and Maryland, and between Penna and New Jersey. Actually, he wrote Penna and Jersey. The troops raised and to be kept up by, and I guess back then Massachusetts was Mass, M-A-S-S-E-S. Sounds like a snake. All right. 3, violations of the law of nations and of treaties. From the number of legislatures, the sphere of life from which most of their members are taken, and the circumstances under which their legislative business is carried on, irregularities of this kind must frequently happen. Accordingly, not a year has passed without instances of them in some one or other of the states. The Treaty of Peace, the treaty with France, the treaty with Holland, have each been violated. See the complaints to Congress on these subjects. The causes of these irregularities must necessarily produce frequent violations of the law of nations in other respects. As yet, foreign powers have not been rigorous in, oh my lord, animadverting us on us, animadverting on us. What? Wow, we lost that word somewhere. This moderation, however, cannot be mistaken for a permanent partiality to our faults or a permanent security acts. It's abbreviated acts, A-G-S-C. Those disputes with other nations, which being among the greatest of public calamities, it ought to be least in the power of any part of the community to bring on the whole. 4, trespasses of the states on the rights of each other. These are alarming symptoms and may be daily apprehended as we are admonished by daily experience. See the law of Virginia restricting foreign vessels to certain ports, of Maryland in favor of vessels belonging to their own citizens, of New York in favor of the same. Paper money, installments of debts, occlusions of courts, making property a legal tender, may likewise be deemed aggressions of the rights of other states. As the citizens of every state aggregately taken stand, more or less, in the relation of creditors or debtors to the citizens of every other state. Acts of debtor state in favor of own citizens who are relatively creditors towards other citizens. This remark may be extended to foreign nations. If the exclusive regulation of the value and alloy of a coin was properly delegated to the federal authority, the policy of it equally requires a control of the states in the cases above mentioned. It must have been meant, 1, to preserve uniformity in the circulating medium throughout the nation. 2, to prevent those frauds on the citizens of other states and the subjects of foreign powers, which might disturb the tranquility at home or involve the Union in foreign contests. The practice of many states in restricting the commercial intercourse, and yes, not what you think, with other states and putting their productions and manufactures on the same footing with those of foreign nations, though not contrary to the federal articles. That's my serving wedge coming in and out. Contrary to the federal articles, is certainly adverse to the spirit of the Union and tends to beget retaliating regulations, not less expensive and vexatious in themselves than they are destructive of the general harmony. Number 5, want of concert in matters where common interest requires it. If anybody has this stuff available to them, you two hosts out there want to jump in, let me know. I just got the idea. I'm the only one to pull this one up. But just interrupt me at any time. Number 5, want of concert in matters where common interest requires it. This defect is strongly illustrated in the state of our commercial affairs. How much has the national dignity, interests, and revenue suffered from this cause? Instances of inferior movement are the want of uniformity in the laws concerning naturalization and literary property, of provisions for national seminaries, for grants of incorporation for national purposes, for kennels and other works of general utility. which may, at present, be defeated by the pervasiveness of particular states whose concurrence is necessary. Sorry, I said pervasiveness. It should be perverseness of particular states whose concurrence is necessary. Number 6, want of guarantee to the states of their constitution and laws against internal violence. Again, this is Adams making a point. What's wrong with the Confederacy and why we need a more perfect union, as the other hosts have pointed out. The Confederation is silent on this point, and therefore, by the second article, the hands of the federal authority are tied. According to Republican theory, right and power, being both vested in the majority, are held to be synonymous. Again, Republican back then was different than Republican today, and that's another story. According to fact and experience, the minority may, in an appeal to force, be an overmatch for the majority. One, if the minority happen to include all such as possesses the skill and habits of military life, and such as possess the great pecuniary resources, 1/3 only may conquer the remaining 2/3. 2, 1/3 of those who participate in the choice of the rulers may be rendered a majority by the accession of those whose poverty excludes them from a right of suffrage and vote, and who, for obvious reasons, will be more likely to join the standard of sedition than that of the established government. 3, where slavery exists, the Republican theory becomes still more fallacious. Number 7th reason, want of sanction to the laws and of coercion in the government of the Confederacy. A sanction is essential to the idea of law, as coercion is to that of government. Federal system, being destitute of both, wants the great vital principles of a political constitution. Under the form of such a constitution, it is in fact nothing more than a treaty of amity, of commerce, and of alliance between independent and sovereign states. From what cause could so fatal an omission have happened in the Articles of the Confederation? From a mistaken confidence that the justice, the good faith, the honor, the sound policy of the several legislative assemblies would render superfluous any appeal to the ordinary motives by which the laws secure the obedience of individuals, a confidence which does honor to the enthusiastic virtue of the compliers, as much as the inexperience of the crises apologizes for their errors. The time which has since elapsed has had the double effect of increasing the light and tempering the warmth with which the arduous work may be revised. It is no longer doubted that a unanimous and punctual obedience of 13 independent bodies to the acts of the federal government ought not to be calculated on. Even during the war, when external danger supplied in some degrees the defect of legal and coercive sanctions, how imperfectly did the states fulfill their obligations to the Union? In time of peace, we see already what is to be expected. How indeed could it be otherwise? In the first place, every general act of the Union must necessarily bear unequally hard on some particular member or members of it. Secondly, the partiality of the members to their own interests and rights, a partiality which will be fostered by the courtiers of popularity, will naturally exaggerate the inequality where it exists, and even suspect it where it has no existence. Thirdly, a distrust of the voluntary compliance of each other may prevent the compliance of any, although it should be the latent disposition of all. Here are causes and pretexts which will never fail to render federal measures abortive. If the laws of the states were merely recommendatory to the citizens, or if they were to be rejudged by county authorities, what security, what probability would exist that they would be carried into execution? is the security or probability greater in favor of the acts of Congress, which, depending for their execution on the will of the state legislators, which are, though normally authoritative, in fact, recommendatory only. I have a problem with that word. Wow. Number 8, in some of the states of the Confederation is recognized by and forms a part of the Constitution. In others, however, it has received no other sanction than that of the legislative authority. From this defect, 2 evils result. 1, whenever a law of the state happens to be repugnant to an act of Congress, particularly when the latter is of posterior date to the former, it will be at least questionable whether the latter must not prevail, latter meaning former, and as the question must be decided by the tribunals of the state, they will be most likely to lean on the side of the state. Number 2, as far as the Union of the States is to be regarded as a league of sovereign powers and not as a political constitution by virtue of which they are become one sovereign power, so far it seems to follow from the doctrine of compacts that a breach of any of the articles of the Confederation by any of the parties to it absolves the other parties from their respective obligations and gives them a right, if they choose, to exert it, of dissolving the Union altogether. Well, this does go on. I'm like halfway through this. I think we're getting the feel here, and anybody wants to check this out, it's way too long for me to give it to you. But it's the writings of James Madison, May 7, 1787, Vices of the Political System of the U period states. Vices of the Political System of the U period state. The link is just too far to go into. And I'm not going to read any more of this because I think we've gotten the gist, so to speak, and everybody can go look it up for themselves. But I'm going to let, since I've been talking forever, it seems, I'm going to let Troy come in and opine on this. Go ahead, Troy.
Well, there's not really a whole lot else to say. I mean, there were a whole lot of, like we said earlier, positives and negatives, and he was going down a list of some of the problems that were with the articles. I mean, we can throw out some of those, if we want. I mean, but it's you got to keep in mind what people don't understand is that the Articles of Confederation were only in effect for about 7 years or so, or at least from its final ratification until the time they were replaced. So a lot of the ideas held true. A lot of changes and tweaks were made when we looked at a new constitution. And Madison obviously was one of the most prevalent and influential individuals when it came to swaying people's minds towards the need for a more perfect union. And that, not a whole lot more to say. I'm done.
Well, you know what I got out of this, and from previous things we've discussed. Everyone thinks the founding father was some kind of, they could see into the future, and everything they did was looking to the future. When in fact, if they learned from experience, they learned all the complaints they had, with Great Britain, the things they witnessed in Europe. They absolutely abhorred democracy, and now they wrote up this Confederation and the Confederacy, and it was like, wait, this ain't working. This isn't working right. This is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong, and we need to fix this because we can't let this go on. It wasn't sort of like, oh, let's make some grand document. It was like, no, let's fix this. Let's make sure this can't happen. Let's pay attention to everything that's going wrong in this Confederacy right now, and let's come up with a new document that will ensure that these things can happen. I mean, that's kind of my take on it. Loki, go ahead. You're on here.
Well, yeah, you're right, Brian, but there were some incidents that happened in U.S. history that actually really did drive them to writing up the Constitution and getting away from the Articles of Confederation. I mean, one of them that I'm sure we'll talk about eventually is Shays' Rebellion up in Massachusetts. And that really did show, I think, to Congress that there was definitely a weakness in the central government, that the central government had to have more strength, and they had to be able to do things that were not necessarily given them, the powers were not given to them in the Articles of Confederation. And that, I think, is one of the big things, and that's something we'll cover later on, but there were a lot of events that led up to that, and where they were looking at the powers that were vested into the federal government, and that they were not adequate for this nation at that time. Back at you.
No, you're absolutely right. I did some reading on Shays' Rebellion. We didn't get to that tonight. But it's kind of interesting because I'm at war with Shays Automotive, but that's another story. Shays' Rebellion was an important part of this. The articles aren't working. There'd be a lot to go into tonight, but we do need to talk about that. You're right, and I had kind of let that slip through my fingers. I've been very busy, folks. I'm sorry. I've only got half a cord of wood up for the winter, and I need to get working. And so I've been working all day, every day, and hard to do my research as well as I normally do, and for that I apologize. All right, Troy, let's see your opinion on that. Go ahead, Troy.
All right, sure. You were talking about Shays' Rebellion. I mean, that wasn't until 1786. Keep in mind, we just barely talked about the Articles of Confederation, which was originally adopted in 1777. So we still got a good chunk of time period there. I did most of my preparation not knowing exactly what direction you wanted to head, because the information you gave me was the events leading up to. So I spent my time reading about the Battle of Trenton, the Second Battle of Trenton, Princeton, the Battle of Oriskany, Brandywine, Germantown, Saratoga, and those kinds of things. So that's where I spent the majority of my prep time. And then looking into the actual getting to the adoption of the Articles of Confederation. And you had originally said maybe going up to the Treaty of Paris, and I'm thinking, well, that's still quite a jump in time frame, because we're talking 1783. We still have pretty much most of the rest of the Revolutionary War to go through. So I didn't know how much you wanted to cover battles and what they meant. You had mentioned wanting to talk about some about Benedict Arnold. Actually, he's one of my favorite characters in the whole time period. And I know Loki and I actually had an offline discussion about that one night. And so that's something that I'm looking forward to getting into. We're already an hour and 3 minutes into the show, and I don't know how much you want to try to cram into this evening's show. So that's entirely up to you guys. Done.
No, absolutely. As a matter of fact, start with Benedict Arnold, since you like that topic so much. I did want to talk about him, and since you like it so much, why don't you take some time on the show and talk about Benedict Arnold? Go ahead.
All right, sure. Benedict Arnold, I think what really inspired me to read about him is because I heard about him. Anytime you hear somebody, even in like Bugs Bunny cartoons, or Daffy Duck cartoons, someone acts like looks like a traitor. They call him a Benedict Arnold. And so I looked a little further into him, and I actually saw a pretty darn good historical account made for TV movie on him some time ago that inspired me to go read even more about him. But though he was best known for the betrayal of the cause, and when he was planning to surrender West Point over to General Burgoyne, I really think an awful lot he got a bum rap in many regards, because there was an awful lot that led up to his fateful decision. Number one, the man was married to a Tory wife, and so he had that going on at home. Now, that's not to excuse anything, any kind of betrayal, But you got to figure, this guy was probably the most successful general throughout the course of the American Revolutionary War. I mean, when you look at the capture of Ticonderoga, he invaded Canada, the Battle of Valcour Island on Lake Champlain. When he was in Danbury in Ridgefield, Connecticut, he was promoted to Major General. He was in the Battle of Saratoga. He was wounded. He also had his share of detractors. And the only way I can compare, perhaps, to anything close to modern history, and though their personality types are probably very different, is George Patton. Patton was one of the most successful generals that we had during World War II, and he had his degree of success and his degree of promotions, as did Arnold. But Patton also, and a lot due to his own mouth, his own attitude, and sometimes he got hosed in some of the things he said that were misconstrued in his actions to inspire his troops. Arnold was passed over right often for promotions by the Continental Congress, and oftentimes other people got a lot of credit for what he had done. A classic example that comes to mind is when Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys met up with Arnold, and how they basically ended up taking an awful lot of the credit for when they were looking at Ticonderoga. And the other thing about Arnold, remember we talked about during the Declaration of Independence towards the end, when we pledge our lives, our sacred honor, this man sunk his treasure, his own treasure, into it. I mean, he was a successful merchant. His father was a merchant who lost everything he had and turned to the bottle. And so here, Benedict Arnold made something of his own life. He got to be very successful in the military. He had his own personal fortune that he sunk into the cause. And constantly, he was denied reimbursement by the Continental Congress. So he really felt gypped and really felt betrayed an awful lot by the very nation that he was giving his life for. He left his wife to go fight for. So this man was literally losing everything. He was successful at times. He used an awful lot of militia troops, he had probably more success than a lot of other people in using militia troops during, like, the French and Indian War. He was not as outgoing or publicly demonstrative about things such as the Stamp Act, but he did become a smuggler. So the man had the salt and the wherewithal to stand up and not be the firebrand that we talked about, let's say, with Adams, or let's say with, whether John Adams or Samuel Adams or maybe even a Jefferson. But at least the man had a profound love for his nation. He had a profound hatred for the taxation, and he was fighting for the cause. But time and time again, he was disappointed. He was hurt by an awful lot that went on. And so basically he was convinced, I think probably by his Tory wife eventually, to say, hey, look, meet with General Burgoyne's folks. He petitioned for and he plotted after receiving the command of West Point. Unfortunately, I won't say unfortunately because it's fortunate for us, because for over a year, this guy had been giving information and was giving intelligence over to the British Army as to Washington's tactics and some of his plans. So obviously that's not a good thing. I mean, there's no excuse that I can see for the treachery that he did. But there was a spy that was caught with the plans in his pouch that outlined the very idea that Arnold was going to turn over West Point to General Burgoyne. And as soon as that news came out, basically he fled the country. and he made his way over to England, where he tried to have a successful career, but it didn't go really well. If I recall correctly, he pretty much died in poverty, and that's about it. I mean, he died poor, bad health. He just had a little tiny obituary written about him, and he was only 60 years old in 1801 when he died. So it just fascinates me that what would turn a man who was so successful, had done so much for this nation, probably more than any other general on our side, to turn him around where he would say, you know what, this just isn't worth it anymore. I think it's a lost cause. I'm tired of getting hosed. And you know what, I'm going over to the enemy side. And he actually did receive, I believe, a major general's commission in the British Army. All right, that's my biography. I'm done.
That was very well done. I had read up on him and today, as a matter of fact, before the show, and you pretty much covered everything. And the important thing that I noticed that you covered, that most sites on the internet and most books do not cover, is the fact that they just say, well, the plot to turn over West Point. They never say for a long period of time he was giving away information on George Washington's plans, military plans, which is much more damaging than just turning over one fort. But they always leave that out. I believe he also gave his leg in the Revolutionary War. I believe his wife ended up dying, if I can remember correctly. And it was just, I don't know. I can't make any excuse for the guy. He just seemed to be somebody that didn't feel like he got what he deserves and decided to kick the country so much that was trying to win its revolution, which is something to despise in a lack of character. But certainly, I don't know. That's not something I don't expect in human nature. For me, anyway. What do you think, Troy? Go ahead.
No, I think you're exactly right, and that's why I say what fascinates me is to see what would take a man who was so loyal and to have him turn around. Betrayal is something that's really hard to understand, and that's why I tried to grasp a little bit about when I was reading what he went through, what he must have been thinking. I mean, I know what betrayal is like. I've experienced it even recently within my own life, so I know what that feels like. And I just try to apply that to somebody who feels like he's been betrayed by his own nation. And you're right about his wife. I mean, he took a second wife when he went over to England. So yes, he did lose his wife here. So I can imagine his despair. But yes, the betrayal is absolutely despicable. But I understand it. I certainly don't condone it, but I comprehend it. As opposed to people who would have done it for money. This man did it because he felt betrayed by the nation which he loved, but he also did it for a position of importance because he also felt that he'd been shafted throughout his career. He felt shafted by the glory that Ethan Allen and his band of merry men got during the Revolutionary War. So those are all the things that I look at, and I understand it. But like I said, I don't condone it. Back to you guys.
No, I think I can sum it up into one word, which is the problem in this country right now. He became narcissistic. He cared more about himself than his fellow colonists, than the cause, than the country that he was sworn to defend. He became narcissistic and thought about himself first. And I think that's a big problem we face in this country now. Okay, Loki, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I agree with you because if you read the history of General Arnold before he did betray this country, he was an extremely successful general. He was probably Washington's best general that he had under his command. And his exploits at Fort Ticonderoga were definitely overlooked in history. And like Troy was saying, all the credit goes to Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys up there from Vermont. And but the thing is, he was a very good general, and he did get screwed by this country. As we talked about last week, a lot of the founders that actually signed the Constitution gave away their fortunes too. and were screwed by it. So, but they stayed loyal to the cause, and so again, with agreeing with Troy, I cannot condone his actions, but I can understand them. I mean, you get to a point, you beat a dog so long, and eventually he's going to bite. And I think it's the same thing with people. Not all people are the same way. They can only take so much of a beating. And so, did he think he needed? I think he actually desired the recognition that I think he was duly warranted, and he didn't get it. But, again, I do not condone his actions, and he did die in England eventually, a pauper, a very poor man, because not even England did anything for him when he went there after the war. But you can't take away the fact that during his time in the Continental Army as a general, he was an extremely good general. And he did a tremendous job for this country until he eventually turned on it. Back at you.
I won't take it away from him that he was an excellent general, which he was. I think you fall prey to your own dark side when you start saying, I deserve. Shouldn't all he wanted to do was fight the British and win the revolution and the freedom of his countrymen? Wasn't that something he should have focused on rather than recognition? Lots of people lost their fortunes, everything they own. They didn't go into it for their obviously later they got a lot of recognition in the history books because they were more in the formation of the government. They were more behind the scenes. Like Troy said, the more outspoken people that were politically motivated out there on the soapboxes and pamphleteers. And I think Jefferson, I wouldn't add to that. I think you were looking for Paine's name on that one. Jefferson was actually kind of quiet and behind the scenes. He was just important because he was in the clique, and he also was a law student, so they needed his legal help. But it's interesting that I think that's a human failing. I deserve something. I think the minute we start saying that, we walk down a dangerous path, and I think that's what we can learn from Benedict Arnold. At least that's what I take from the story of Benedict Arnold, that he let his own desire for fame, for fortune, eventually take over his morality, his integrity, and his convictions. That's kind of how I see it. That's the lesson I take from Benedict Arnold, and it's an important one. But I think we should all remember that vanity is not a good thing. We can't think about you're creating a nation, for goodness sakes, and you start getting into pettiness of me, what I've given up. He certainly saw his soldiers die on his command. What about what they gave up? They gave up their lives. So, this is my take on it, and I'm going to let you two, I'm going to bring you two and have the last word. Troy, you go ahead first.
All right. Yeah. Basically, we've all pretty much summed up the different aspects of what he went through. I think we're all on the same page. It's I just look back and there is a character difference. And is it narcissism? Well, gee, I don't know. Everybody has their own temperament and their own attitudes in life, and their own influences that they've got coming against them. For instance, in his case, Arnold had a very loyalist wife that he was contending with on a daily basis. She had his ear constantly, and she had contacts within the British forces. So I can understand that temptation being there. The temptation, yes, for glory, but also I look too, and I mean, this man lost his entire fortune. Now, granted, others did as well. But he chose his path, and unfortunately, I look back and I think about the quote from Julius Caesar by Shakespeare: "The evil that men do lives after them. The good is often tarred in their bones." And that's why I'm glad that we're looking at the historical aspect of Benedict Arnold, because, yeah, the good was interred in his bones, and the only thing people remember is the negative that he did. So at least we're looking at, from a purely historical perspective, his accomplishments. I mean, heck, I can look back and look at all the great things that Adolf Hitler did, too, and really appreciate all that he did as far as motivating a nation, as bringing in all the industrial capacity that he did, and all that he was able to accomplish. But doggone, the evil certainly lives after him, as evidenced by the History Channel, which should be called the Hitler Channel, because it's a lot of World War II footage. But just drawing the comparison. So that's how we remember Arnold, and at least now we can look at both sides of the coin and show this is what happened, and these are the historical facts, and just leave it at that. So, Loki?
And I agree with you. Looking at, that's what we're trying to do here, is look at the historical aspects of what happened and why this nation came to be. And you can't say that this nation is perfect. I mean, there's no nation that's perfect. We tried to do it. We tried to do it with the Articles of Confederation. We found out that worked. It was a big experiment. It was a tremendous experiment in the world. We were establishing a form of government that had never been established. Over in Europe, there were monarchies. We were trying to establish a republican form of government. And even if you look at ancient Rome and their republican form of government, they still had the Caesar. Even though it was a republican form of government, the Caesar was the ultimate power. And he could basically strike down what the Senate said. So there had been a lot of experiments into republicanism, and definitely none into what they call today democracy, which is definitely not a democracy. It is a republic, a representative republic. And I think that what we're seeing here is not only the birth of a nation, but a birth of a new philosophy of government. A government where the people were supposed to have the say in how the government was run. And I think that came out of the death of the monarchy in this country, where the people were tired of the monarchy. We were tired of having one person that had absolute say over everything. I mean, they still had Parliament in England, but it didn't have the power that they were going to, what they intended to give our Congress, and limit the power of the chief executive and bring him down basically to the same level, where there was Congress, or the government was always actually broken up into three branches, and they all had to work together to run this country. So it was a big experiment, and they had a good idea with the Articles of Confederation. It started really well, but through experience and through history, they found out that it still had its own weaknesses. And they experimented with it. It was a tremendous experiment, if you look at the annals of history, that you don't, and I don't think that people in this country really understand what a great thing that was, and it has affected the world tremendously. Now there are republics, basically republics all over the place, and but there's still nothing like the United States. And with that, I'll get back to Brian.
Okay. I have to agree with all of that. It was called the Great Experiment by Europe. Self-governing. That was kind of the concept. And as we're trying to point out through the history of all this that we've been covering, the colonies took a very long time to decide to break away from Britain. About 50 years of grievances. It wasn't something that happened overnight. It was 50 years of trying and banging their head against a brick wall, and certain events that just tipped them over the edge. But then still, their first attempt at self-government was a failure. It didn't work, and they had to redo it. Most people probably haven't even heard of the Articles of Confederacy. But that was our first government of the United States. It turned out to be, it had good concepts, but it had to be tweaked to, as has been pointed out, a more perfect union that they created us. And again, we'll talk about what happened afterwards at other times, as always. We're trying not to get into the future unless this show decides in the future, as the timeline progresses, to continue, which may happen, frankly. But right now we're sticking at the time we're in and trying not to. It's hard. Occasionally one of us slips and makes a reference to today. I did it tonight. My bad. And this is not my show. I am just the moderator. It's Troy LaPlante and Loki and my show. It is our show, and it is your show because you're listening, and it's all about education and trying to understand the history and the truth. Now, Troy did a lot of work on this, and I'd like to give him some time to talk about the battles that were during this time frame that led up to the Articles of Confederation. Troy, go ahead.
Okay, well, now that I've closed out all my notes, one of the things, looking at some of the battles, hold on, let me go back to where I was before. I was looking at stuff like the Battle of Trenton, which happened on December the 26th of 1776. And looking at the Battle of Trenton, you hear about the famous Washington crossing the Delaware. You see the picture that from 1851 of him standing up in the boat. People got to remember that this was a very wintry evening, and we're talking about way up north. For those people who are in the South listening, that a lot of people don't comprehend just how cold it gets with a winter snowstorm going on. We're talking about the Continental Army going basically against the Hessian Brigade. And that's something we really haven't covered so much. I know that we were going to talk about, the Treaty of Alliance, the alliance between the U.S. or what will become the United States and France. But what people don't understand too, basically, there are a lot of mercenaries, for lack of a better way of putting it. A lot of what are now considered German mercenaries were hired by England to come fight on their behalf. And so they had a lot of these people, a lot of Hessian soldiers, about 1,400 of them. And Washington showed up with about 2,400 people, and they attacked in a couple of columns. The rumor was that the Hessians were drunk from celebrating Christmas, and they weren't prepared for battle. I don't know. Maybe they were caught off guard because of I'm thinking primarily because of a blizzard, figuring that nobody would be able to cross the Delaware. And actually, some people didn't make it. We actually had some soldiers that died on the march from hypothermia. So when you look at stuff like that, but it began at 11 o'clock at night with a snowstorm on Christmas Day. And not all troops were able to reach the bank of the Delaware until about 3 o'clock or so in the morning. And then they started marching. They didn't get to fight till 8 o'clock or so, and probably the battle lasted about an hour. So it was one of the biggest victories as far as public relations, because after that, we ended up having a lot of people who said, just maybe we can possibly win this thing, and it inspired a lot of people to join up. So so that's what I was looking at with the Battle of Trenton. Then you had the Second Battle of Trenton that happened not too long after that, so-called because it's like the second battle, but it happened on January the 2nd, involved Cornwallis with about 1,400 British troops, and up against George Washington. And Washington and his staff basically snuck away from that fight. So there really wasn't a whole lot to it, but they took a lot of casualties on the British side when the British were attempting to come over. And small groups of Americans had started to slow their march coming towards them. Washington's army built up campfires after having taken out about 400 or so of the British. And then while they built up campfires, they kind of snuck away. And that was the Second Battle of Trenton. And then they ended up going to Princeton the very next day and having a battle there, which, if I'm not mistaken, Washington ended up capturing Princeton, I thought. I'm just going by memory here. But anyway, like I said, there was a whole lot of battles in between. Bound Brook, Oriskany, Brandywine, Paoli, with the Paoli Massacre. Then you had the British occupation of Philadelphia. You had the Battle of Germantown. We talked a little bit about Saratoga, and all that happened by October the 7th. And then when we talked about the Articles of Confederation being adopted by the Second Continental Congress on November the 15th. So we had a whole period of January, or actually Christmas, up through November with a bunch of different battles. And we actually had, in the beginning, we had a good many American victories over the British. And then really it started to turn once they had more battles towards the south. In the Carolinas, we see where we actually had a ton of defeats for the Continental Army. So, but I'll throw it back to you guys for now. People can always look these battles up. Just look for a timeline of the battles during the Revolutionary War.
Yeah, and you know what you're saying, Troy, is absolutely correct. And what we have to look at, up until that point, I mean, our army had suffered losses. I mean, we had some victories, but for the majority of the point, it was nothing substantial. It was nothing that anybody, and especially any nation in the rest of the world, was going to support this fledgling country. They looked at it that the British Army was the most powerful army in the world, and they looked at the United States Army as nothing more than farmers with pitchforks. These guys were brought out of the fields and put in uniform, and now they were supposed to be an army. But we had some victories. We had Ticonderoga, then we lost Ticonderoga. We had other victories. But then when it came to the Battle of Trenton, where Washington's army did defeat the Hessians at Trenton, and then with the battle at Saratoga, the other countries in the world started to look at the United States seriously and said, you know, they can actually win this thing. And we don't like England either. So we'll support, and we'll throw our support behind this new country. And then we had, you know, in that time frame of a year, it actually did turn the French or the way that they thought about the United States. It turned that completely around. The French finally realized that this small country can beat England, and then they basically signed the French alliance with the United States, and so they basically came up and said, we will support this fledgling country, and then after that, Spain did it too. So these countries were realizing, and what it needed, we needed these victories. We needed Trenton. We needed Saratoga. Once we got those, the rest of the world came in and said, these guys are worth supporting. Now we'll throw our hat behind them and see how they do, and we'll help them out. And I'm done on that one.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up, Loki, because that's one of the points that I was wanting to make too. Is when you said a mouthful, when you said, and we don't like them either, and then you launched into about how Spain joined the French, and if I'm not mistaken, the Dutch also had their 2 cents worth that they threw in as well.
Right.
And
right.
Go ahead.
Absolutely. Well, the Dutch didn't do it. You know, weren't going to do it militarily, but they threw some cash behind the United States.
Right. Because England was involved all over. I mean, people don't realize that they were involved in their kingdom was so spread out. Their resources were stretched pretty thin. And I'll shut up about drawing parallels to present day. But you can see where they were so involved all over the world, and they had so many enemies that were just cheesed off with them. When we start looking at their resources that were dwindling, that they found a lot of their and let's face it, that's why they ended up quartering troops. That's why they ended up pillaging when British troops were here in America during that time period from the locals, because they didn't have the ability to be able to supply their armies in as much as they needed to. But yeah, they were all over the world. People were not real happy with the British, and so that's what brought these people. Once we started to win Trenton, when we started to look at Princeton, we started to look at, like you brought up with Saratoga. It really turned the tide, and I know that we started out talking about the Marquis de Lafayette, and we never really talked about him this evening, but that's something that maybe we can touch a little more in depth a little bit later on. I'm done.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? We should do that. As a matter of fact, I put you in charge of talking about the Marquis de Lafayette because I am tired. That was excellent, guys. You guys did a great job of summing all that up. I think one of the most important things that I think might have been past people was back then nobody fought at night and nobody fought on religious holidays. So the Hessians weren't expecting them to cross the Delaware in the dead of the night and attack the morning of Christmas, and so they were taken by surprise. But that's what we did during the Revolutionary War. We didn't fight the way normal armies fought, and that was what made it so successful, which is a good thing. I don't know why during the Civil War we went back to it again. It's just I guess we wanted to be like everybody else. But we just need to remember that these were incredible times. When Washington crossed the Delaware, his people were starving, freezing. They had frostbitten feet. A lot of them were wearing rags on their feet for boots. They didn't have the proper clothing. It was just horrible. I mean, the state of the affair of Washington's army was unbelievable. Nobody would ever imagine that army could achieve anything. I mean, they were literally dying. They were starving and freezing to death. And yet, he still got them to cross that Delaware and win the day. And that's the kind of steel that America used to be made of. And that's why I like reading U.S. history, but I'm not allowed to go forward. So what we're going to do from here is try desperately. I went too far with the Treaty of Paris. But we're going to work our way towards the Treaty of Paris. So any studying you want to do along the way, that's what we're doing for the next show. Overstudying is good. If whatever we don't get to, we don't get to. I do want to learn more about Lafayette. Actually relearn, because I remember studying about him. I actually read a whole book about him when I was younger. That would be excellent. Actually, someone to come over here from France and say, "I want to come and join your cause, and I will do it. I will join your army for free." I mean, you gotta love a guy who's willing to work for free.
And he was only 19. I mean, think about it.
I think this is, and he's only 19. Absolutely right. I mean, that was pretty incredible. All right, before I end the show, is there anything anybody wants to talk about tonight before I end the show? I'll start with Loki. Go ahead.
Well, another person other than the Marquis de Lafayette, we have to remember von Steuben, too, who came over here to help us. And I'm going to do some reading up on him, so I'll be ready for that next week. I mean, we did have help. We had some help from some very good military leaders.
Cue the Beatles music.
Yeah.
We get by with a little help from our friends.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I think that's not only the Marquis de Lafayette, we also have to look at von Steuben. And I'll take care of that. So I have a couple books here on him, so I'm done.
Great. You got Marquis de Lafayette and von Steuben for next week. I will do my work on the timeline and some other interesting side notes I can find. I promise to try. I have a lot of wood to cut, slit, stack. That is a reference to the colonial period, folks. I have to get ready for winter, and I'm late, so I'll be stacking and splitting and cutting wood for quite a while now. I'm busy. Anyway, I want to thank Loki and Troy LaPlante for helping host this show and making it what it is. I want to thank you people for listening, and I hope you will listen again. This is the Patriots Pub, and we are on every Thursday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, till we're done. So tune in or download and enjoy it in your spare time, always with your favorite beverage. That's what I have to say on that subject. Remember, it's the pub. Pull up your favorite chair and your favorite beverage and imbibe and enjoy and go over U.S. history with us as we relearn. I am relearning things that I forgot. I am learning things I had never learned when I previously studied U.S. history, and I hope we can bring that to you. And I'm going to end the show now with Semper Paratus, always ready.